Legolas, the green leaf of Mirkwood. Legolas is one of the most remarkable characters in The Lord of the Rings. He combines youthful recklessness with the wisdom of 500 years of life. His unusual friendship with a dwarf adds an enigmatic depth to his character. In Tolkien's early works, the role that eventually fell to Legolas was initially assigned to another elf. This version of the lore was published only after the author's death. It is likely that the presence of Glorfindel in the Fellowship, one of the first awakened at the dawn of Arda, seemed excessive to the professor. This makes sense. The ancient Eldar possess the gift of foresight, but are also subject to the influence of the evil brought into the world by Morgoth. Thus, Legolas appeared in the epic, a representative of the woodland elves who lack the unquenchable longing for the unreachable shores of Aman. Perhaps the group of world saviors needed exactly such a firstborn, pure of soul and unburdened by Feanor's oath, the dark curse that befell the high elves of Middle-earth. The woodland elves of Mirkwood trace their lineage to a mix of two Teleri peoples. Known as the Morikendi, these are the Nandor and Sindar, who never saw the light of the two trees. The exiled Noldor called them Umanyar because they did not complete the journey to Aman. Under the shade of ancient forests also lived the Dark Elves, the Avari. These secretive firstborn refused to leave Middle-earth at the very dawn of time. It is believed that their blood also runs in the veins of the elves of Mirkwood. Mirkwood, Greenwood the Great, Taur Ea Daedalus. This vast forest was founded by Orofer in 750 of the Second Age, uniting the scattered woodland dwellers under his rule. This exile from Doriath sought to isolate himself from the outside world in the forests east of Anduin, beneath the Misty Mountains. But the woodland realm could not entirely turn away from the troubles of the world. The dark shadow of Sauron spread relentlessly, and only a strong alliance of light races was destined to hold it back. Orofer and his son Thranduil were forced to gather an army and take part in the War of the Last Alliance. Orofer, a victim of his own pride, perished in a suicidal charge on Mordor. After Sauron's fall, Thranduil returned to his homeland and ascended his father's throne. However, the kingdom suffered tremendous losses. For 1,000 years, a fragile peace reigned, shattered by the emergence of the mysterious necromancer in Dol Guldur. Darkness once again crept into the sacred elven woods, and the attack of the dragon Smaug severed the woodland realm from its usual trade routes. It was during this difficult time that Thranduil's son Legolas was born. The history of Mirkwood preserved neither his mother's name nor the exact date of his birth. Interestingly, in the detailed chronology of the Third Age compiled by the author, this event is also absent. Until Gollum's capture, the elven prince lived in his father's shadow. It is likely that the numerous skirmishes with orcs and other servants of Sauron did not occur without the king's son being present. This is why Bilbo Baggins and Thorin Oakenshield's company never encountered him while traveling through the forest. The orcs' daring attack to free their prisoner from the elves succeeded, and from that moment begins Legolas's personal story, the story of a keen-eyed archer and a loyal friend. Unmasked, Sauron left Dol Guldur, and taking advantages of the internal strife among Numenor's heirs, openly set out to rebuild Mordor. The threat of destruction loomed over the world when Gollum fell into the hands of the Dark Lord. Having learned about the ring, the enemy immediately sent the Nazgul in pursuit of its bearer. The Lord of Rivendell, Elrond, told those gathered at the council that none of them were there by chance. The young prince of Mirkwood brought dire news to the wise. the dangerous prisoner Gollum had escaped. For the first time, the beings who shaped the fate of the world met the son of the proud Thranduil. What did they see? Tolkien was extremely displeased when Legolas was portrayed with delicate, feminine features. In the Book of Lost Tales, Part 2, he wrote the following. He was tall as a young tree, lithe, incredibly strong, able to quickly draw a great warbow and shoot down a Nazgul. Endowed with the immense vitality of elven bodies, so resilient and resistant to harm that he walked only in light shoes on rock or through snow. The most tireless of all the Fellowship. This was how the author envisioned the inhabitants of the Woodland Realm, free of the excessive refinement of the exiled Noldor, who longed for the cloudless life of the uttermost west. Possessing the best qualities of his race, the skills of a ranger, and excellent combat training, Legolas was unconditionally accepted into the Fellowship of the Ring. During the difficult journey, the elven prince had to prove himself many times. It was largely thanks to him that the company survived the attempt to cross Caradhras. His ability to walk on deep snow without sinking allowed him to detect the conjured storm in time and help the group avoid it. Even in the harshest trek over the pass, Legolas's sense of humor did not abandon him, helping to alleviate the oppressive feeling of being watched. The decision to go through the ancient dwarven kingdom of Moria was one of the hardest in the first part of the journey. "I do not wish to go to Moria," said the elf, but he did not insist on his own way. The attack of the wargs on the way to Khazad-dûm confirmed the concerns of the elder members of the Fellowship, but it was once again Legolas who ensured their survival. His keen elven hearing and precise archery were decisive in the battle. In the deep caves of the ruined dwarven kingdom, the prince saved Gimli at Balin's tomb. And then he spotted the Balrog just in time, saving the entire Fellowship. The outcome of the journey through Moria turned out to be as grim as the elf had feared. The only one who could stand against the fallen Maya, Gandalf the Grey, fell into the abyss with the monstrous creature. Lothlorien, the Hidden Land, the Golden Wood, was the last remaining haven of enchanted Malorn trees in the Third Age. In ancient times, it too was inhabited by wild woodland elves, the Nandor and Avari. After the War of Wrath, Andir Malgalad, the first Sindarin king, settled here. The local elves and the Sindar, who refused to sail to Valinor, merged into one people. In the Third Age, they were ruled by the Sindar lord, Celeborn, and his wife Galadriel of the Noldor. Here, under the shade of magical trees, the Fellowship of the Ring was meant to find safe rest. This was Elrond Half-Elven's belief when he sent them on their journey. However, their arrival was not met with warmth. At the very borders of the sacred forest, Gimli, the hobbits, and even the men could have perished. Perhaps the fair Lady Galadriel expected their arrival, but the guards had their own opinions. Once again, Legolas's knowledge of language and wisdom saved the Fellowship from certain death, demonstrating remarkable diplomatic skill. The Prince of Mirkwood managed to convince his kin to escort the group to the Lords of the Realm. It was during this episode that Legolas realized he had somehow befriended a dwarf, an unheard-of event for the woodland elves and the heirs of Doriath. Nevertheless, the young elf was willing to be blindfolded, just like the dwarf. Thus, they reached the forest capital. After catching their breath and receiving the guidance of the mighty Galadriel, the Fellowship set off down the Anduin. The elven boats were manned by Gimli and Legolas. It is worth noting that Legolas's visit to Lothlorien would later change his life, though he would not realize it until after the breaking of the Fellowship. For now, he carried away from the Golden Wood a Galadrim bow and a glimmer of hope. The spell of enchantment was broken by an orc attack led by the Nazgul. Here, Legolas was destined to showcase his incredible archery skills. It was he who managed to slay the fell beast that served as the Wraith's mount. Deprived of his steed, the Spectre fell from the battle, allowing Frodo to escape. But how bitter was the loss when the Elven Prince and the remaining members of the Fellowship realized that Frodo and Sam had not only fled from the orcs. The moment the Ring-Bearer and his loyal Sam left the group marked the end of the Fellowship. It was also the first real encounter with a new breed of orcs, the Uruk-hai. A combined force of dark creatures had stealthily abducted two other hobbits, Frodo's friends. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas sent Boromir's body down the river toward Gondor and decided to search for the hobbits. This decision was not reached easily by the three remaining members of the Fellowship. Even before Frodo and Sam left, the group had been planning to continue their journey toward Mordor. Only Boromir, blinded by the power of the ring, insisted on marching to Minas Tirith. During that final council of the Fellowship, the Elven Prince demonstrated unwavering loyalty to his duty. His people felt physical pain when entering lifeless stone wastelands, lands steeped in the will of the enemy. Fate, or perhaps Frodo, had decided otherwise. But neither elf, dwarf, nor man hesitated for long. They simply followed the trail. Thus, in the Two Towers, the three hunters entered the scene. With hope or without hope, we will follow the trail of our enemies, and woe to them if we prove the swifter. We shall make such a chase as shall be accounted a marvel among the three kindreds, elvens, dwarves, and men. May the three hunters be blessed, said Aragorn when his friends sent Boromir's body down the river. The abductors had fled westward, toward the endless pastures of Rohan. Skilled trackers, Legolas and Aragorn, quickly took up the pursuit. The rocky wastelands and Sauron's malevolent will slowed them down, but nothing could stop them entirely. By the end of the first day, the three trackers discovered the site of a skirmish between the orcs. Here, the elf, man, and dwarf first realized that some of the dark warriors served Sauron. The orcs were in a hurry, and the hunters quickened their pace. By dawn, the trio had reached the borders of Rohan, and the oppressive weight of dead stone lifted from Legolas. The mystical energy of the firstborn surged anew within him, and he spent the nights gazing at the starlit sky. However, he was not given much time to admire the scenery. On the second day of the chase, a found brooch from Pippin's cloak pointed unmistakably to the need for haste. Spending sleepless nights in the open steppe, Legolas absorbed the strength of living plants. The orc tracks led the hunters toward the ancient forest of Fangorn. The next day, the friends spotted an armed company. With his elven sight, Legolas not only identified the warriors, he counted them and assessed their weapons. 105 fair-haired riders of Rohan were returning from the borders of the sacred forest. Sincerely considering them allies, the three hunters initiated negotiations. Once again, Legolas found himself cleaning up the mess left by the unyielding stubbornness of his dwarven friend. A careless remark by the riders' leader, Eomer, about Lady Galadriel nearly led to a fight. The Elven Prince likely did not even realize that when he drew his trusty bow, he was first and foremost standing up for a friend. The Rohirrim's hostility toward his kin had not evoked such a fierce reaction in him before. Aragorn diffused the quarrel. The three hunters received horses from the riders of Rohan and an invitation to Edoras. Bidding farewell to Eomer and his men, they raced forward. They suspected which group of orcs the Rohirrim had annihilated, but no one could tell them the fate of the hobbits. With a horse borrowed from Eomer, Legolas rode with true elven mastery. It is said that elves can communicate with any living creature, be it a tree or a crocodile. The Prince of Mirkwood not only convinced the proud Rohirrim stallion to obey him, he also managed to take Gimli along as a second rider. This horse was destined to remain a faithful companion to the elven warrior for a long time. The swift-footed steeds greatly eased the company's journey to Fangorn. There, at the forest's border, the rescue party found a scorched battlefield, the remains of the orcs left behind by the Rohirrim. Bitterness crept once more into the hearts of the travelers. In the darkness of night, even Legolas's keen elven sight could not discern the fate of Merry and Pippin. With heavy hearts, the hunters settled down for the night beneath the canopy of the ancient forest. However troubled the elven prince was for his comrades, the night spent in the ancient home of the Ents was a balm to Legolas's soul. The moment he stepped beneath the trees, he felt himself whole once more. He did not fail to remind the wary Aragorn and the frightened Gimli that, by elven standards, he was still quite young. It is said that a woodland elf flourishes in his natural element, and that the element itself favors the elves. Even the branches of the trees seemed to reach toward the fire they had kindled, soaking in the warmth. Amidst this nighttime idyll, the Rohirrim horses also found someone familiar, and, with joyful neighs, ran off. It was Legolas who first noticed that there was no fear in their voices, but it was Gimli who spotted the strange, ghostly old man. Feeling uneasy in the living forest, the dwarf expected trouble at any moment. Partly under his influence, the companions mistook the old man for Saruman. Clearly, they were to face an enemy in the morning, yet one doubt troubled Legolas: the joy of the fleeing horses. Morning is wiser than evening. But even then, the situation nearly ended in a fight, for the ghost of the night appeared before them again. Now fully real, an old man clad in dazzling white robes. Saruman, after all. The wisdom of the woodland elf, who refrained from acting rashly, spared Legolas and his companions a great embarrassment. Despite Gimli's eagerness to strike, Legolas hesitated. He hesitated when his friends were bound by a spell. He hesitated when the strange conversation began. He hesitated when the spell broke, never having loosed his bowstring. And he was richly rewarded for it, for the first greeting from the reborn Istari was given to him. The forest of Fangorn allowed the Prince of Mirkwood to rest his body and soul, to renew himself and step into new adventures fully armed. His greatest weapon, however, was hope. So strong that Legolas seriously considered living here after the war. For now, the path of the three companions and Gandalf the White led to the defiled lands of Rohan. The horses had returned, and there was no reason to wait any longer. Alas, when Legolas had hoped to immerse himself in harmony with nature, he had not yet heard the prophecy Galadriel had sent him through the reborn Istari. Even after hearing it, the elf did not fully believe it. The prophecy said, "Legolas Greenleaf, long under tree, in joy thou hast lived. Beware the sea. If thou hearest the cry of the gull on the shore, thy heart shall rest in the forest no more." The Prince of the Greenwood had no innate sea longing, unlike the exiled Noldor. The yearning for the blessed shores of Aman did not burden the hearts of the Sindar, Nandor, and Avari, whose blood flowed in Legolas's veins. But alas, the design of Eru Ilúvatar, the creator of the world, weighed upon his children. According to this design, the Third Age would be the final era for the elder races. Prophecies are all well and good, but for now, war loomed before the young woodland elf and his companions, and its first grim face revealed itself in Edoras. The proud and free Rohan, which had shunned evil for centuries, had fallen under the sway of Saruman's cunning servant. King Theoden failed to see in time that the wise old Saruman the White had fallen victim to Sauron's influence. A treacherous spy had wormed his way into the king's inner circle, and, step by step, had bent his will to Isengard. The three companions of Gandalf witnessed the overthrow of the fallen wizard's servant. Theoden's awakening led the Rohirrim to war. A massive army of Uruk-hai marched to subjugate rebellious Rohan. Of course, neither Legolas nor his friend Gimli had any thought of avoiding battle, no matter how hopeless it seemed. Thus, the paths of fate led them to Helm's Deep. Though the fortress of Hornburg was considered impregnable, the odds were grimly stacked against them. The defenders prepared for a heroic death. Against the backdrop of this tension, the famous bet between Legolas and the dwarf, who would slay more orcs, seemed almost childishly reckless. Perhaps it was the woodland elves' ancient dislike for bare stone, or perhaps it was the limited number of arrows that influenced the outcome. Legolas, who performed incredible feats of archery and saved Aragorn from certain death, lost. It turned out that Gimli had slain one more orc than he had. The resolution of the bet proved amusing. According to their agreement, Legolas would have to visit the glittering caves of Algarond with Gimli. The dwarf claimed they would strike the elf to his very heart. Despite his aversion to barren stone, Legolas readily agreed, but in return, the dwarf would have to journey with him to Fangorn. No matter how great the valor of Helm's Deep's defenders, everyone knew the odds were against them. Had it not been for the arrival of the Huorns and the forces of Lord Erkenbrand, who came with Gandalf, they would have faced certain doom. The Prince of Mirkwood did not outwardly express his joy at the timely intervention of Mithrandir and the beloved trees. Upon arriving at the ruined Isengard, Legolas and Gimli finally reunited with the hobbits, whose disappearance had brought them so far. They even had time to share a meal before attending the confrontation with Saruman, who had taken refuge in the ancient tower of Orthanc. The sorcerer's beguiling voice failed to sway the heroes, but they did gain possession of a perilous, ancient artifact. For Legolas, all these events in Isengard were secondary. His greatest adventure was meeting the Ent Fangorn, who greeted the woodland elf with joy. The prince's sincere connection to nature and his love for the forests helped secure an invitation to Fangorn for the dwarf as well, a rare diplomatic triumph, given the Ents' hatred of iron and axes. Upon returning from Isengard to Rohan, the former members of the Fellowship once again parted ways. Legolas and his inseparable friend Gimli embarked on a journey unlike any undertaken by men. A group of northern Dúnedain joined Aragorn. With them came the sons of Elrond, half-elven, bearing a message. If you are in haste, take the paths of the dead. Aragorn's reckless use of the Orthanc Palantir had driven the world to the brink, and there was still no news of Frodo and Sam. During the march through the dreadful caves, only Legolas felt no overwhelming fear. Elves do not fear the dead. Perhaps the blood of the High Elves of Doriath played a role here, granting him power over both the seen and unseen worlds. The journey was a success. The heir of Isildur, leading an army of specters, swept aside all enemies in his path and swiftly emerged at Pelargir. There, the corsairs of Umbar were preparing to strike Gondor. It was here that Galadriel's prophecy came to pass. The cry of gulls over the shore awakened in Legolas, the longing for the sea and the distant western lands. A shadow that had tormented his Noldorian king for thousands of years settled upon the soul of the Prince of Mirkwood. From that moment, the brave elf no longer fully belonged to himself. A pure child of nature had been poisoned by the foresight of his people's fading. Henceforth, Legolas would bear this burden alongside Elrond and Galadriel. The Elven Prince had little time to dwell on sorrow. Evil was advancing relentlessly. On the captured ships of the vanquished corsairs, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, along with their army, arrived in Gondor, which was preparing for a final, desperate battle. In the battles of the Pelennor Fields and the fight at the Black Gate, the Elven Prince once again displayed astonishing feats of war. Even the destruction of the Witch King might not have been possible without his help, though he did not strike the final blow himself. And yet, the ultimate victory in the War of the Ring belonged not to the tall and noble elf, but to the small and unassuming hobbits. The Dark Tower fell, and Legolas, along with his friends, joyfully greeted the surviving Frodo and Sam upon the field of Cormalin. The Fellowship of the Ring was reunited one last time in spring, after the heroic hobbits awoke from their healing sleep. The full company attended the coronation of Aragorn, now known as King Elisar. Together, they accompanied the body of the fallen Theoden to Edoras. Here, their paths diverged, some of them forever. Thus ended the Third Age of Middle-earth, and the time of the elves was gone forever. After the burial of the king of the Rohirrim, Legolas and Gimli set off on their journey. It was time to fulfill their promises. Their path led them first to the glittering caves of Algarond, and then to the ancient, mysterious Fangorn. Perhaps Legolas was still trying to silence the call of the sea within his heart, while the remnants of the Noldor and many Sindar journeyed westward. Legolas returned to his homeland. Alongside his father and kin from Lorien, he helped cleanse Mirkwood of the lingering darkness, renaming their realm Erin Lascalin, the Wood of Green Leaves. Fitting, isn't it? After all, the very name Legolas means green leaf. A portion of the Mirkwood elves, led by their prince, journeyed to Ithilien, where they restored the ravaged land, turning it once again into a flourishing garden. Nearby, at the request of King Elisar, Legolas's friend Gimli labored in the towers of Minas Tirith. The friends were reunited once more, but these lands now belonged entirely to men. Legolas felt the pull of the sea growing stronger. In the year 120 of the Fourth Age, the long-lived King Elisar passed away, leaving Legolas and Gimli as the last remaining members of the Fellowship of the Ring in Middle-earth. Frodo and Sam had long since sailed westward, as had Elrond, Half-Elven, and Lady Galadriel. The Istari had departed as well, having fulfilled their purpose. Nothing remained to hold the Prince of the Woodland Elves in the lands of men, and the music of Aman called ever louder in his heart. He built his own ship in Ithilien. The fearless elf invited his dear friend Gimli to accompany him, and the dwarf agreed. Together, elf and dwarf sailed westward, thus breaking Eru Ilúvatar's decree that the children of Aule should never set foot upon the blessed shores. The higher powers are fickle, but the Creator is just. Under Legolas's protection, Gimli became the only dwarf ever to see the faraway shores beyond the world. And so the brightest green leaf of Middle-earth faded away. It may be argued that Legolas's role in the epic is not so great. However, it is through his character that the Lord of the Rings conveys the theme of unity among the three light races. His strange and once impossible friendship with a dwarf proves that true goodness rises above old grudges, and the present age is stronger than the feuds of the past. Perhaps Tolkien believed that a Noldorin elf would have been unable to overcome these prejudices. Thus, a truly bright elf from a dark forest appeared in the tale, young, unburdened by ancient resentments. But the Quendi shall be the fairest of all earthly creatures, and they shall have and bring forth more beauty than all my other children, and they shall know greater bliss in this world, spoke Eru Ilúvatar at the dawn of time. And is there any elf more worthy of these words than Legolas, whose soul was never touched by darkness? That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support is the best reward for me. Thank you for watching, see you soon, goodbye.